Hello, Internet, and welcome to episode 64 of the Deep Fried Neurons podcast. I am uploading episode 63 as we speak, as I speak. Basically, you can suffer in silence while I talk to you through a Zoom in some room. And, this time is just me. I'm sorry, I was gonna bring you two different guests for this part for episode 63 and 64, but as life is, it didn't work out, so I couldn't get them on the podcast, but I will try to get more guests soon. Meanwhile, I plan to upload 4 episodes a month. This is the fourth one, and I'm sorry that I've been lagging on my promises. I will make sure that I don't in the next month. So this one's about dying at war that most people have done in the past. I don't know what else to tell you about that, more than that. So I'm just gonna cue the fucking. Hello, kids. Oh, that must have hurt. I'm sorry. Well, today's episode is trying to capture a very particular emotion from history, which might be continued further. It's, well, the way we look at history, more importantly. And of course, the primary generation of the emotion or this episode, when I came across the thought, was World War One. I've talked about it in tape 4 of Musings About Memes. That's a weird place to talk about World War One. About how in the 1920s the youth was called the lost generation, not only because they died, like in the West, not in the East. We were busy fighting the British. They, on the other hand, were psychologically in a place where they were feeling lost and disoriented from all the pointless destruction they saw in the war. Not to mention that a lot of them died during the war. It was a bleak thing to witness as a generation, and it sort of made them question very being, or like the way society is and how it makes us look as witnesses of our own time. And that disorientation sort of gave birth to Dadaism as a art movement at the time, which is a completely different conversation altogether. Here I want to just talk about the title. So, given how World War One was perceived, that emotion, however, was recorded completely differently when it's recorded in our history books for children. I'm pretty sure no matter what corner of the world you are in the free world where this podcast can be heard, it is a very it is a matter of pride when somebody in the family goes into the armed forces for service, and it should be. These people sacrifice their own individuality, and well, not individuality every time, but definitely their time with their families and an option of a safe, secure society for exchange of extremely difficult tasks of the state, which need to be done to ensure safety of the rest of us. And well, however, the experience of the soldier in that context is not necessarily something that gets represented in media as often as you would like it to be, or as it should be read. Of course, soldiers are glorified and they are looked at as heroes of our time, which there's nothing wrong with. But I also want to explore the other side of how the experience of being a soldier goes. And that's why I came up with the title of this episode, which is The Glorious Died in Absurdity and Regret. And it sort of came to me after a long night with friends, after I came back home. I saw this photo on the Reddit years and years ago of a dog and his owner, who was a soldier, I think a British soldier, wearing a gas mask. and he was in a compilation of photos of a battalion that died in the trench wars of like in a chlorine gas attack, because these were not activated charcoal masks, and the ones that were given to senior ranking officers first, and then the junior ranking officers. And I was like, that dude did not picture dying that way. I mean, the experience of life by itself is pretty absurd, which is what I keep going on and on about. If you've ever met me in person, I'm insufferable about that. But this man died in extraordinary amounts of absurdity. He inhaled chlorine in a trench far away from his family, wearing a uniform next to his co workers. I think that is pretty much it. I think it at least cracks the top 10 of dying. Like, dying in absurdity of for me. And not to mention, we all die in the regret. It is inevitable. That's what I took back from Søren Kierkegaard's literature. I've been planning to do an episode about him as well. Søren Kierkegaard, the writer of Either Or, sort of put this message across in his writing that no matter what you do, what you will end up with at the end of life is regret, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you accept and choose to be not happy, choose to be okay with what you regret at the end of it. Like, whether you get married, whether you stay single. And this man who's barely 24, not even 24, 20. I live in Pune, which has Khadki War Cemetery, if you guys know about it. And there are battalions after battalions of soldiers who are buried there, who died during the Khadki War. And most of them, there's like a portion of them who are like whose names are pretty obviously suggesting that they're from North Africa. I'm not sure what part of Africa. I'm sorry, I can't recognize those names country wise or culture wise. And of course, it said down there that the North African battalion that was transported or that was stationed here at the time, maybe they were running out of people. And all of them are buried here through a Christian ceremony by the British, away from home, and most of them under 20. 18 to 20 was the average age in this entire group. And I was like, I'm pretty sure this man was not even asked if he wanted to be buried here in remembrance of whatever contribution he made to a war that was not his at all. And I kept pondering on that thought, and I was wondering that, is there any documentation of whether there is profound regret or profound recognition of absurdity of how life of a soldier is by a soldier, as a victim of the war machine that world civilization at large has been. And I was not disappointed. I came across like a lot of literature by Wilfred Owen, who happens to be the second most studied poet in English language across Europe, after Shakespeare, of course. And I'm just gonna read some of his poetry. This one is called Anthem for the Doomed Youth, that he wrote. And he was a decorated officer, from what I understand. The poem goes, "What passing bells for these who die as cattle? Only the monstrous anger of the guns. Only the stuttering rifle's rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. No mockeries now for them, no prayers nor bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choirs, the shrill demented choirs of wailing shells. The bugles calling for them from sad shires, what candles may be held to speed them all. Not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes, shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall, their flowers the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dusk a drawing dawn of lines." And there's another author who writes along the same lines, who's Sigfried Sassoon, one of his poems that stuck with me, I'm not going to read that one aloud, this is not a poetry reading podcast, is Suicide in the Trenches, which is, of course, about a young boy in his battalion who was very good at his job. And after 3 days of being stuck in a trench of day in and day out warfare and guns and, explosions, this man took his own life, tragically. And Sigfried Sassoon wrote about it to, probably cathartically deal with it. I don't know what was going through his mind. And I just wanted a podcast out there to record that we recognize there is a sentiment where the soldier sees himself as a victim of two states quarreling and having an individual experience which is so robbed of autonomy sometimes, and not necessarily necessity under those circumstances. And I'm pretty sure that this is obvious, but war bad. That's exactly what I was going for. So, bye. Okay, that's all I have for you this week. I hope you were moderately amused, maybe, at that episode. And if there's any war stories that you want me to cover, well, let me know. Support me on Patreon if you think the content is worth it. Like, share, subscribe my YouTube channel. Check out the video essays that I've put out, especially Musing About Memes, which is a series I'm very proud of. And find me on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We're already there. And I'll see you next week, most probably. Bye.